You see beside Australian roads crosses erected where there's been an accident, somebody's died, and this is typical. The road here actually appears quite safe. It's a highway, and yet here's a death. Pieces of the car are still here. Earlier O'Brien died here in July 2017. Very sad, but driving is a dangerous pastime, and people die on highways and roads all the time, even in places where you wouldn't think an accident would happen. A lot of the markers are much smaller. Here's one simply where somebody called KC died. Born 1976, died 2024. And again, it's a safe road. Really, there shouldn't be an accident on this sort of road unless the person is very tired and has just fallen asleep. In many areas of Australia, there are very large areas, sometimes measured in tens of square kilometres or hundreds of square kilometres, which are used for grazing cattle. Now, instead of a fence, what's called instead of a gate, because there's a fence running up each side, instead of a gate, you have a cattle grid. Now, the reason the cattle grids work is that the cows are very shy to step on the thin steel rails. So by and large, they just don't go through a cattle grid. So they are effectively a gate for cattle, but of course cars can drive over them. There's a range of hills running up the eastern coast of Australia. This range is called the Great Dividing Range, and the majority of Australia's population live between this range and the sea. We have really an almost empty land, if you like, behind that range. Now, what we're looking at here is the Barkly Tablelands, which extend from the Northern Territory to Queensland. And this is typical of very large areas of inland Australia, which are quite hot, dry and flat. And because they are so flat, the roads seem to run straight almost forever. And there's not a lot of traffic on roads like this. Driving the Barkly Tablelands is interesting because this highway, the Barkly Highway, is one of the very few highways in Australia left where drivers signal to each other. In the old days, this is going back to my childhood 70 years ago, there was a custom where on quiet roads a driver would lift a finger to wave to an oncoming driver. So that habit has pretty much died out, except, interestingly enough, on this highway, the Barkly Highway. There are one or two other places. For instance, in Flinders Island, there's there's a sign which is erected by the local government saying, "Don't forget to wave." So there you are, the tourists The tourists are obviously not used to waving to other tourists, to other motorists, and so the local government's put up a sign to remind them. Towards the east, the Barkly Highway eventually takes you to Mount Isa. Mount Isa's a remarkable mine. I think it's the oldest continually operated mine in Australia. My parents met and fell in love there in the 1930s, and so the area has a special significance for me. Mum and Dad spent their weekends exploring the country around Mount Isa, which is an impressive, beautiful, dry, harsh, intimidating landscape. Yes, they look back on those years as being some of the best years in their life. Certainly the most adventurous. Now, this is something you don't see in Australia much anymore. It used to be much more common than it is now. It's a rarity now. So this happens when there's maybe a family living in the country away from the main roads, and the kids grow up and leave home, and then maybe the wife dies or leaves home, and you get a single old male living in a reasonably remote place. And this guy has collected cars over decades. He's done nothing with them. He hasn't tried to sell them. He hasn't tried to fix them up. So they're here just gradually rusting away. And I guess you could say that about the owner too. He's just gradually rusting away. One of the things that you used to see a lot on Australian or beside Australian roads is dead animals. Now, of course, over the decades, the populations have been hugely reduced, so you don't see them as much as you used to. But here's one. Looks like it's only recently been killed because there's no brown hawks around. The crows and brown hawks usually find the carcasses pretty quickly and ultimately dispose of them. But yeah, this one's just been killed recently. So what I'm going to do is to just okay, so I'm just going to get it off the road. The person who killed it should never have left it on the road. Now, one of the things that you have to be careful of, in fact it's probably the biggest danger when you're driving these long, straight, lonely roads, is falling asleep. And if you fall asleep at the wheel, you're going to end up dead or injured, or the car's going to be a write-off. Now, it's common. In built-up areas near cities, the local council will come out and remove the wreck. Now, my guess, this is beside a safe, straight road. My guess is there's only one explanation for this wreck, and that is that the driver fell asleep. Unfortunately, in Queensland, a lot of drivers disobey the law and they do not wear seatbelts. Looks as though the driver, maybe even the passenger here, might have been thrown through the windscreen if they weren't wearing their seatbelts. This is called a floodway. Used to be very common in Australia, not so common now. The important thing is if there is a major flood with rapidly flowing water and you can't see how deep it is or shallow it is, do not enter. Many people have been killed by their cars being swept away. Usually, of course, there's hardly any water in it, just like the one we just crossed. Now, this was once a very proud, beautiful house built in a extremely secluded part of the forest. Obviously built as a family house, and now it's just falling into pieces. So you wonder what the story was behind that house. I guess the story started off pretty happily. But it ended up a sad story. You see that a lot around the Australian countryside. Here's another ruined building. There are lots of sheds like this around the Australian countryside. You can see it had a wooden frame, probably long ago, quite a strong wooden frame, corrugated iron roof, but now there really isn't all that much left. Aborigines farmed very small areas around rivers and creeks. Once European farmers arrived and the European practices spread right across Australia, a lot of erosion occurred, and here you can see a tree stump left standing about a metre above the surrounding soil. That metre of soil has gone through wind and water erosion thanks to European practices. This would be a typical dry river, not completely dry of course. Paper barks, pools left for dragonflies and maybe frogs. But they're very pretty, I love them. And of course in wet season, this will carry a lot of water. One of the hazards that you've got to be careful of on these long remote roads is unfenced wandering stock. So sometimes the grazier, the guy who owns the cattle, can't afford to put up the fences, so signs are erected that say "Be careful, wandering stock." Now, if you run into one of these animals at night, that's really bad for you. It's bad for the car. It's bad for the animal.